called Simon Graceland next to each other, because it's like, okay, in African influenced music, like I can begin to build my hierarchy, and on this it's sort of like so from that, yeah, that might be a difference between the two of us, because so it'll be interesting, like, to see if that continues to be your thing, Josh, or if it's you like steak and chicken but not pork, So
yeah,
well,
and I'm definitely willing to give them a chance, especially if this is kind of a departure and maybe the band just keeps changing and they go into something I do like. So hopefully that's kind of the case.
Well, this is described in Wikipedia as new wave, art pop, progressive pop, and experimental pop.
Definitely 2, 3, and 4. I don't hear many of the new wave influences here anymore. Do you guys?
No,
I'm still trying to figure out what I mean. It's new wave. I always thought is more upbeat.
Yeah,
like I think like Blondie, B-52s, parts of Elvis Costello, like Devo. Like, to me, that's what new wave is.
It's a loosely defined music genre, John, that encompasses pop-oriented styles from the late 70s and the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
fair enough.
But and I don't know. I think I generally gravitate a little bit more to this type of music. I like more ambient stuff like that. So it doesn't. So and we haven't done a ton of that, I don't think, up until this point. So it's.
I think it becomes more popular too.
Yeah, I think we're going to get more of it. So buckle up, Josh. Yeah. It's gonna
shoegaze. That's probably
that could get a little bit more in the noise noise rock thing.
I think shoegaze is going to be very tough for you, Josh, based on like your palate for all that stuff right now. So, but.
Also, Radiohead cites them as an influence, so I can see why Matt likes this band.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Weezer covered "Life's What You Make It." I don't know what album that's on. Maybe their '80s album.
That was on this one.
Some
the
sort
one you
of
just listened to.
Color.
It was on this one.
No. I mean, what Weezer album?
What Weezer album?
Some Color. The Pink album.
It's probably the Teal album, right? The cover. Didn't they do the covers album? It was the Teal album, right?
Yeah.
Isn't their first
we'll
album
talk about
the
Weezer
Blue album, and
get
it's
to
kind
the
of teal? Anyway.
No, there's a new Teal album that's just like 80s covers. It's horrible. So
we can talk about that.
It's got Africa by Toto.
Yeah, that's the
African cover on it, John.
Yeah, no, I know. It's nothing about hearing that made me want to listen to
and
that.
And Take On Me. I think it opens with Take On
God.
Me, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, talk about your most basic bitch cover. Anyway, we can do that. It's like really. It's like I'm gonna do. It's not even going obscure. It's like I'm gonna do "Take On Me" by
It's not even
a-ha.
that different of a cover.
Well, and it's not even like you go and you dig a song that's like obscure. You just go, "Oh, I'm gonna take Toto's Africa." Anyway, we'll save that for another time. But Michael Jackson is next.
Michael Jackson. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Michael Jackson, Bad. Speaking of albums that sold a couple copies, Bad sold quite a few copies.
More than 10 million, probably.
Quite a few more than 10 million, I'm sure. But Matt, how many plaudits did this album get? In Best
Shamon, guys. This is number Bad by Michael Jackson comes to number 53 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 6 in 1987, number 397 of all time. It's Michael Jackson's third highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, coming behind Off the Wall and Thriller. It did make Rolling Stone's list. I believe it. I'll have to double check this. I think it's 197. It's either 197 or 297, but I'll do that in a second. And it's 60. He's listed as number 64 of overall artists on Best Ever Albums rankings.
I think of ham on whole wheat when I think of Bad these days.
With that.
Ham on whole wheat.
Ham
so,
on.
like stuff. I'll have a slightly
194. I'm sorry, it's 194 in Rolling Stone. So there you go.
I'll have a slightly controversial take on this one, guys. I think that if you made this album like a 7-song album, this might be the best Michael Jackson recording ever, because like the good stuff on this album is
really good.
Amongst my favorite Michael Jackson shit ever. The problem is like there's 4 songs on this album that are objectively bad. And it's and not like Bad, the album cover, like Bad is and it's such a weird thing, because if you take this album and you make it bad, the way you make me feel, even Man on the Mirror, which I remember being schlocky, was a much better song than I remember it, especially when it comes in, because it saves me from the middle of the album where I'm like, oh, that's a rough spot. And then I Just Can't Stop Loving You is one of his best ballads. And then, that like 3 finish song, like Dirty Diana, Smooth Criminal, and Leave Me Alone, which I always thought was a really interesting musical song, even though it's kind of like Michael Jackson kind of having war with the tabloids, which would become more and more a thing that he.
That was a bonus track too, guys. That was not. In the
it wasn't on the
pressing.
original.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't on the original, but it's a very famous song because the video features him in some sort of like spaceship, like with all the.
Isn't he with Bubbles? Isn't he with his monkey on that?
At a point, yeah. And it's like all the tabloid stuff. It's actually pretty. It's a pretty moving video in some ways when you know what happened to Michael Jackson. But yeah, like songs like "Dirty Diana" and "Smooth Criminal" and the way you make me feel and stuff. I mean, these are like upper echelon Michael Jackson. So I love those songs. They're songs I could listen to 5 times in a row. And like every time I don't know what it is about Dirty Diana, but like something about that makes me think like I really wish like Michael Jackson did a rock album, because whenever he incorporates rock elements, he's an excellent frontman, and like all I could think of is like I would like to hear a band that's fronted by Michael Jackson, because when you think of the songs that have guitar elements in what he's played, like Beat It and this, I'm like there's a rock frontman in Michael Jackson that just never happened. Now, in fairness, his career worked out pretty well for him to his other lane. But, I mean, Smooth Criminal is an incredible song. It's so unique, too, as a pop song. It's so polished, but also so interesting when you hear it. And the replayability of that song, for me, is incredible. And once again, just the recording of as a pop artist, it's really hard to describe like just how good a pop star Michael Jackson is. Like it just in terms of writing catchy songs, in terms of the clean production, but it not being disposable, a word we've used tonight, genre shifting. And I know that this album has been described as like he took the Thriller formula and just went extra with it. Like this album was extra, and there's some truth to that take. But it's also one of his best singing albums. His voice is just clarion clear in this album, and it just feels like the essence of Michael Jackson like he's fully aware of being Michael Jackson here in a way that I think even on the earlier 2 albums, as great as they are, he still was kind of learning to be Michael Jackson on those albums. And on this, he's like Michael Jackson, massive megastar, and it's big, but it's not bloated like some of the other stuff would become later. I mean, he's showing elements of like the galaxy brain with like Man in the Mirror and over pop star self-awareness with Leave Me Alone, but those are still really good songs. And so from that end of things, if you're going to write those type of songs, the music of Leave Me Alone is a really interesting like how would I'll be interested to hear how you guys describe it, but the it's that like sort of that pattern like and it's like a world music almost, but also grounded in like Motown and funk. It's just a very interesting structure of a song. So yeah, this one gets a strong thumbs up from me. And even though some of the songs on here are complete throwaways, in my opinion, for a guy as talented as Michael Jackson is, I mean, it is impossible to not give this album a thumbs up with the top tier quality pop songs that are on this. So strong thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I would agree that this is the most Michael Jackson album of the Michael Jackson thing that he does, right? At least sonically, it's I equate it to like when Dylan did Blonde on Blonde. Like that's when he leaned into the Dylan voice the most. He was just really, and Michael right off the back, this is where like shaman and like all woo, like he's really all those sounds that he's coming out with and stuff like that.
Onomatopoeias.
There you go.
Onomatopoeias. Yes.
Yeah, he is leaning into this. And I think I correct me if I'm wrong. The video for Bad wasn't there like a short film, like even more so than Thriller was?
You ain't bad. You ain't nothing.
So right. I read about this, Matt, because
Wesley Snipes.
I was interested in kind of the whole everything around this album as well. So Martin Scorsese directed the Bad video, and it was 18 minutes long. And then you have the whole thing with Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, which was like the anthology kind of video with that.
That Smooth Criminal was couched in and later became the Michael Jackson thing in Space Mountain,
yes.
right?
And I also played the first level of Michael Jackson's Moonwalker this week, so just to
on
get
Sega
a feel for
Genesis?
that. Yes, on Sega Genesis.
Where you have to unfortunately save the
Save
children.
They go,
Yeah.
Michael.
That age is the worst.
Yes.
It is a pretty awesome video game, though, I have to say. Yep.
So anyway, it was
find
like a whole like,
saves.
multimedia thing for
You can
this, but
kill
yeah.
everybody by dancing, right?
Yes.
Like that's the special thing where you
can
hit it
kick
and then
them,
you
or
dance.
can like
Yeah.
spin. Yeah,
Yep.
I
Oh
recommend it.
God! Wow.
And don't you open up doors and you get the children, but also like sometimes the monkey
Yes.
the monkey rides on your
Bubbles,
shoulders. Yeah.
yes.
Oh my God! Wow. So there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I do remember that. It's like that's one of those things where they showed the video like in its entirety, like the first time, and then it did the abridged version, which
Right.
is much more friendly to the airwaves. But So yeah, I agree, and it's a similar feeling that with Thriller because there's some high highs on here and there's some lows. I would still argue though that the lows on Thriller are still lower than the lows here for me.
There weren't many lows on Thriller in my opinion.
The Girl Is Mine and the last track, The Lady in My
Girl
Life.
Is Mine, I think, was my only complaint of that album.
You like The Lady in My Life?
It was. I didn't hate it nearly as much as you did. It was a standard issue ballad.
Yeah, but and so there's. Don't get me wrong. There's songs like what is it? So Speed Demon, Liberian Girl, Just Good Friends. I think those three in particular.
3 through 6 are kind of the.
I don't mind Another Part of Me. Another Part of Me. The downside of that song for me is how it's very 80s. Like it's got that overly 80s production, which I can live with, But I still feel that something that's really dated is just not. It's just not as strong, right? Because I think
it sounds like video game music. Another part.
Yeah,
of
there's a little bit of that too.
It's like an old school Nintendo game, like background music. Yeah.
I kind of like the chorus, but
yeah,
Bad's great. The Way You Make Me Feel, I totally forgot about that song, and when it came on, I was like, oh
really?
Yeah, and it's just like. Because with Michael Jackson, it's not one of the top songs that comes to my mind. But at the end of this week, I'm like,
it is for me.
That,
it's like a top
that might be one of my
favorite.
favorite. No, but now it's like that might be one of my favorite Michael. That's like a top 5 Michael Jackson song, I would say. And I would also put. I've always loved Smooth Criminal. I mean, that. You're right, John. There's a really unique aspect of that. It's just such a cool, like everything about it. The background singers are great, and just. The production and the video for that was great. It was just that's a cool ass song. Really,
the various parts of it are just there's like 5 different unique parts to that, and all of them just work perfectly in conjunction with each other.
It's a really good song. Dirty Diana's always been a song I've liked. That guitar part's great. I think did Slash play that? I don't think he played it on this album, I think he played. I think at some point he played that maybe on tour or some show or something like that with Michael Jackson.
Do you know? In the modern context, people consider that song problematic, which I don't get at all. It's about a groupie.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm like, they're like, oh, it's a controversial song. I'm like, it is? Like, it's basically Billie Jean, like, but just like,
right.
Without the pregnancy. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't know.
It almost kind of sounds like Billie Jean at times too, in the like structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I Liberian Girl, I knew John. I was like, oh, this will be funny to get John's take. I mean, that's Michael Jackson. That's definitely world music. Like you got pan flutes on there. It sounds like anyway.
I'm okay with Michael Jackson's world music normally. I just didn't think that was a very strong song.
Yeah, and I think that those like the filler songs, I didn't dislike any of them. I thought that they were fine. I wasn't like I don't need to skip over them. But it is interesting, that there's probably more lows on here, but I don't think I disliked anything more than those 2 songs on Thriller. But that's just me. But yeah, it's unbelievable. Like songs are just like huge songs that are ridiculously catchy, really well produced. He's an excellent performer, a great singer, and this record has some of his best stuff. So how could you not be a thumbs up on it? So
you didn't even mention Man in the Mirror and I Just Can't Stop Loving You, which were mega freaking hits as well. So
Man in the Mirror, and I even know what that's about because he's going to make the world a better place, starting with the Man in the Mirror. Who's him? He's the Man in the Mirror.
Yeah,
because that's when you look in the mirror, it's you.
I'm glad you
So.
paid attention.
Mm-hmm.
His lyrics definitely are stories, though. That's the one thing I like about Michael Jackson. Now, what stories they're about and whether they're him or not, like, is always the $1,000,000 question with him. Because
Well, they say all. Yeah, I was.
There's
just
a lot of
looking at-
paranoia in all Michael Jackson lyrics, if you notice. Yeah.
Yep, all tracks written by Michael Jackson except "Just Good Friends" and "Man in the Mirror." Those were not every other song on here he wrote. So
That's really weird that he didn't write that song, because that is like peak late career Michael Jackson vibes.
"Man in the Mirror."
Yeah, the guy who's writing like "Heal the World" and stuff, and "Earth
Yeah,
Song"
that's-
and all those. I mean, this is the first of those type of songs.
This was written by a woman named Sadea Garrett, and also
She's
by.
who sings "I Just Can't Stop Loving You."
Okay, well, she
Saida-
wrote "Man in the
Saida
Mirror"
Garrett,
along with
yep.
along with Glenn Ballard.
Oh wow, Glenn the producer. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I saw here, Matt, the guitarist on Dirty Diana's Steve Stevens, famously
Steve
known for
Stevens.
writing the Top Gun anthem.
Danger
Yeah,
Zone. Oh, not the Kenny Loggins
Yeah.
song.
no,
the
the slow one.
Oh, and Bill Petrell's on here, who is the guy who's the dad of my buddy's ex-girlfriend. So I hung out at his house before, so that's my
6
claim to
degrees of
fame.
separation.
That's right. Yep. And you guys are
Well-
a part of that now too, because you know me.
Well, anyway, Josh, how did you feel about this album?
I enjoyed this album too. I think it's because his first two albums, or his first two solo albums, have set such a high bar. Off
Those
the
were
wall.
not his first two solo albums, by the way.
Okay, well, the first, however
First
you
two
want to
that we covered.
classify them, yeah.
In Josh's canon, they are. So.
Off the wall.
Well, and most people's they are too, to be fair.
Off the Wall and Thriller. Those are
Yeah.
such high highs for me, and kind of perfect albums for me. I think this is the first one where, there's some weaker songs, and you just can't continue the streak, I guess, for even Michael Jackson. Like John said, some of the songs on here are weaker and things I didn't really know. It's weird too, because I knew this album, but I don't think I had heard Speed Demon or Just Good Friends ever outside of listening to this album, whereas I feel like I knew everything off of Thriller and Off the Wall. So I think that's just kind of a testament to how, I don't know, it's just a slight step down from the other two albums. And that's not to say it's not a good album, because I agree. I think Smooth Criminal and Dirty Diana for me are kind of like the two big favorites off of this album. It's funny too, because Bad is such kind of it's just another almost version of Beat It or Thriller, and kind of the same structure, and I felt like it was omnipresent, but I think these other songs have, at least in the pop culture, maybe like superseded them. I think people appreciate Smooth Criminal more now or something than they did before, whereas I think Bad was kind of the omnipresent song when this came out. I don't know if that's true. It's just kind of my
Well, if you
perception.
go by Spotify plays, number
Okay.
1 is "Man in the Mirror," number 2 is "The Way You Make Me Feel," and
Yeah.
number 3 is "Smooth Criminal."
Got it. And The Way You Make Me Feel just kind of harkens back, I feel like, to Off the Wall in some way. It's kind of, you could put that in that album and it would fit perfectly. So I think he's still kind of riding his strengths and doing what he does best. But I don't know. I don't like the ballads as much. I don't like Liberian Girl or Man in the Mirror as much, even though I can sing along to them. I don't know. I like his stuff that's more, well, I like when he incorporates the guitar, like in Dirty Diana, and I kind of like these more infectious, interesting pop versions of songs versus his little slow down pop ballads. So it's still a thumbs up for me. I think we should mention too that Quincy Jones produced this album, and I'm sure he had a big part in kind of crafting and making it what it is, not just Michael Jackson himself. I mean, he did Thriller also, right? And Off the Wall. I think he did both. Produced both. So he's certainly an integral part of Michael Jackson's albums. I would say too, though, I can't imagine, this is 5 years after Thriller, and like that's such a long gap for an artist. The big talk now, because Rihanna's doing the halftime show, she hasn't done an album in 5 years, since 2018's, and she's kind of not fallen out of the pop conscious. But after 5 years, you do kind of drop a little bit, and so now rumors are swirling that she's going to release another album. So just to say that Rihanna is a huge pop star also, and has more hits than Michael Jackson does, I think, single wise at this point. But yeah, I like the album. Oh, the other multimedia thing I forgot to mention, Captain EO, the ride that was at Disney World, came out at this time, and
3D movie in Epcot Center. Yeah.
Yep. And one of the songs, Another Part of Me, ties into Captain EO as well, or was tied into that. It was featured in Captain EO. So
did you guys catch, by the way, like Bad has a 25th anniversary edition of it that has a whole nother album at the end of it that I had some time this week. And so first of all, it's a 13 song album of which I did not know any of these songs.
These are all like B-sides or like
just I don't know the context, but it starts with a song called Don't Be Messin' Round, and it does sound like another Michael Jackson album, but they have a song called Song Groove, aka Abortion Papers, which I'm like, whoa. There's 2 songs that are 9 and 10 that he sings in Spanish. I listened to this album. Todo mi amor eres tú, and then, which is basically like, I just can't stop loving you, but in Spanish, right? So that version of it. And then Je ne veux pas la fin, which is French, right? So then you're there. Then, perhaps the greatest find of this, guys, was there was a Bad remix featuring our friend Pitbull on it. And imagine Bad. I want you to take a second now, and listeners, I want you to pause the podcast because I want my friends to do it right now. I want you to pull up the Bad remix featuring